I think if we look at children a little bit more closely, we have to be really careful that we're not so focused on training them to act and behave in certain ways that we inadvertently end up interfering with some of their natural gifting. So, the same way that Chad was mentioning his son loved wheels, and then it kind of translated into real world abilities and skills, I do the same thing with Lucas. So, I
Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today. I'm Kiva, and as always, lovely to have you all join in. Today, we have a webinar where Komal is going to be the moderator, and we have our lovely guests, Chad and Mikkel, here with us. And they are together going to be discussing about creating safe spaces, keeping neurodiversity in mind. So before we get in, and I invite Komal and our guests to take over, I would just ask you all to share with us where you're joining in from, and would be just lovely to hear from you all here. Hi, Yamini. Yamini is here. She's the chat moderator for today. And you can all just type in and share with us where you're joining in from. As you all as we wait for others to come in as well. Hi, Bhavin. Bhavin is from India. Hi, Sarika. Hi, Alison. Wonderful. So I'm going to just take the first 30 seconds to just share with you all a few updates from our end. So we have a number of courses coming up soon at Coacharya. And I wanted to share a little about one of our upcoming courses, which is starting on 11th April. So till others join in, maybe we'll just wait for 30 seconds and I can use that time to share this information with you. So the upcoming course is called Integrative Systemic Coaching, and we have two master coaches, Cindy and Ram. I think you must have seen them in various webinars as well. They're going to be facilitating this course, and the unique part about this course is that it's after going through it, you can actually apply for multiple credentialing. So Yamini, I think, has shared here the details about the course. So if this is something that interests you, do have a look at it, and you can write to us at contact@coacharya.com. You can also see a bunch of other courses that are lined up for April. And yeah, you can connect with us anytime to know more about these courses. So wonderful. I think we have a bunch of people here from different places. Hi, Ricardo. Hi, Nanduri. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining in. So welcome again to our session today, and I'm going to invite Komal and our guests to now come in and we can begin.
Thank you so much, Kiva. It's always lovely to be in this space and get a chance to speak with all of everybody. And today I have Chad Youngquist and Mikkel with us. Mikkel has been the Coacharya learner as well. And Chad is a wonderful, wonderful human being who I got to know just by chance while I was on my search to get to learn a little more about autism. And to tell you a little background about today's webinar and how come we are speaking upon autism. So this month, 2nd of April, was celebrated as the World Autism Day. And this itself shows us that how it's so significant to get to know and understand about how the world is changing and shifting, and some of the new terminologies that we are getting to learn about ourselves, about human behavior, human development. And while we get to know these terms, there is still a lot of confusion. There's still a lot of ignorance about these terms. And unless and until you get to experience them firsthand in your very close vicinity or in your own life, it's really challenging to grasp what really is autism, what is ADHD, what is dyslexia, and what are some of the other terms which come now under the umbrella of neurodiversity. And thank God for that word, because that word in itself sort of bring some sort of a safety and acknowledgement for this. I'm sure as coaches, as parents, as adults, you would have a lot of questions in your mind. So we thought, why don't we have a little chat with people who have experience around these, so that we do not just try to delve all of these in terms of definitions, because definitions sometimes are so limiting and they do not do justice to what we are trying to explore, and but understand how does it look, feel, is experienced, and what does it really demand. And so I'll just give a little bit of a brief. Both Chad and Mikkel, while Chad is a working professional as well, and Mikkel is also a motivational speaker and coach now, they're both parents to lovely, bright children who, how would I say it, Chad? Please help me, because I'm a little sensitive about not using the wrong term or the wrong way. Do they have autism or autistic? Like, what is the accepted term to say?
Well, that's an interesting question, because it's one that I battled personally for quite a few years when my son was very young. And it wasn't until I started speaking with autistic adults on social media where they began to share with me that, hey, that term with autism is sort of, it's a person first language. Autism is every part of our being. It makes up the fabric of who we are. And it's not like we have a cold and we can somehow get over it or heal from it soon. This is part of us. And so we actually prefer the term autistic. And I saw a bunch of polls online from adults that have ASD, and the majority of them, not all of them, but the majority of them prefer to be called autistic instead of, you have autism. And so don't be scared from my end to use any kind of terminology. At least for me in our home, we don't, we know that there's a condition, but we don't let that or any title or any words, descriptive words, inhibit the love we have for each other. And it's hard to offend me and our family. We typically use all of the words and as descriptors, so you're fine.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you for saying that and sharing that, because that sort of gives us a permission to hold ourselves with a lot of love and compassion in this space while we are exploring. And before we go ahead, I would like to share a little bit of a story. So Mikkel and I sort of met 2 years back when we were in a coaching relationship with each other. And she was once in one of the conversation saying and explaining certain things about her son who's autistic. And the more she was talking, the more my eyes were widening, and I was like, and my jaw was dropping, and I was like, you are describing my son when he was little. And everything that she said and every behavior she indicated, every challenge, I was like, I had the same sort of experience with my son. And that was like an aha moment for me, and a sort of a relief as well. Because when my son was growing up, when he was pretty young, I would notice and observe that there's something different about him. He is more anxious. His speech took a longer time to get developed. Like if I would have compared, my daughter like started to speak pretty early, whereas he took a longer time. And then too, he was very anxious. I would say back then, I would say very angry child who wouldn't know how to control his emotions or how to express. He was really very, very stubborn. It was very difficult to manage him, to deal with him. he would bang his head in walls, and I wouldn't just know what is happening with him. And once when I took him to a child psychologist, and I was like, I'm concerned about, can you really tell me? He was so sweet with the child psychologist, and he answered everything that he said. And the child psychologist said, you know what? It's just, he may just be just acting out because he get triggered because of certain things, to try and avoid everything that triggers him. And I was like, that's all? Everything else is fine? And the child psychologist, yeah, everything else is fine. I was like, okay. But it wasn't easy. So that day in our conversation with Mikhail, I finally identified that he is an autistic child, although I still haven't had him sort of go through that process for a psychologist to say that, yes, he is autistic. I know because I'm his mom and I've seen him growing, and I see him, what are the things he gets challenged with and what are the things he's exceptionally good at. So that's why I say, apart from going into the definition, let me just hear from you. How did you get to know of autism or this neurodiverse behavior in your respective children? Like, how has been your experience? And Chad, I'll come to you first and then go to Mikhail.
Well, we sort of knew something was different right at birth. There was just these two things happened when he was born. One, he was totally gray in color, like he looked like a ghost. And it was so much that it startled me. And the other thing that happened is that he didn't make a peep. When he was born, the nurses grabbed him, kind of cleaned him off and laid him down on my wife's chest, and he didn't cry, he didn't make a peep, he didn't do anything. And it was the combination of those two things kind of made me pause and just, what's going on here? This is different than what I've seen. This is different than our first child, that sort of thing. And so as he grew, we obviously, because of that, just sort of kept an eye on him. He didn't make good eye contact when he was breastfeeding. And he, once he was able to sit up on his own, he wasn't interested in normal baby things. He would just rub his feet on the carpet for hours, and that sort of thing. And so there were the kind of telltale signs. Once he started playing with toys, he would, line them up in a perfect line and that sort of thing. The what you hear about kind of the normal traits. And so at 1.5, we began to go through some different testing mechanisms, and they first ruled out autism because he does provide more eye contact. And this is he's 15 now, he's 15 and a half. And so this was 13 years ago or 14 years ago. And so I think the diagnosis criteria has changed, and the process by which kids get diagnosed has changed. And so this is kind of old data, but they said, well, he's too huggy, he's too affectionate, and he provides too much eye contact to be considered autistic. And so we went back to the doctors and started exploring genetic testing and different, hearing testing and stuff, because he wouldn't respond and that sort of thing. And then at about 3, his anger ramped up big time. And at one point I went back to the criteria of an autism diagnosis, and I started reading through it again, and I started checking all the boxes. And so we called the children's hospital back up and just said, hey, look, this is what we're experiencing at home. We already have the criteria because we've seen it before, and now he fits the description. And I was doing all these things and more. And so we went back to children's, and at 3.5, I think he was officially diagnosed with autism. So that was our process. And it was sort of like there's a couple of indicators early on that helped us start to think differently. from our other child and to start pay attention very closely. I actually think those things were a blessing because they allowed us to pause and really kind of push into and ask questions and pay closer attention to our son in terms of his development. And so that's how it kind of came about for us.
So such an early stage to identify that there is something not right and it need to be monitored and observed and understood.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Something that you've said about is like, as early you know that there is something which is different, it helps because then you can do something about it. Amazing.
I think parental intuition is something that may not get the airplay it needs, but I believe in it. I believe if you are mom or dad and you sense that something's wrong, there's just a different communication path between you and your kids and you and your spouse or whomever is very close with you than there is with the rest of the world. And so if you are feeling a certain way as a parent, lean into it and explore that.
That's lovely. That's such a beautiful point of the parental intuition. Absolutely. Mikhail, coming over to you. How did you come by the discovery of autism?
So Lucas, right away when he was born, he kind of presented like most of the babies in our family. So he was literally born like eyes wide open. So even the first night in the hospital when he was being passed around and I would start talking, he would turn and look at me. So everybody in the room, like I remember my dad saying specifically, like, this kid's been here before. So he was just really alert, really aware. Like I had spoken to him all day, every day throughout my pregnancy. So it was just amazing to see him turn and look every time I would talk. So eye contact was not an issue for Lucas. And then in terms of things like milestones, he was hitting them early, which was pretty typical for our family. So my parents kept saying, oh, Lucas is just like you when you were a baby. And so I thought nothing of it. But the strange thing with Lucas was he always seemed like an old man in a baby's body. So he knew what he wanted, even as a newborn, really. Like he would make eye contact, or if I gave him to someone to hold and he did not like that, he would literally scream. And as soon as he came back to me, he would be fine. So I realized he was communicating very early on what he liked and what he didn't like. So I think the whole thing that I would say has kind of governed my parenting is really sort of the St. Francis prayer, seek to understand rather than be understood, because I realized in some way, shape, or form, this baby was very aware of what was happening around him and was communicating what he liked and didn't like. So Lucas never napped as a newborn, infant, or toddler. So that for me sort of looked like sensory processing disorder. But at that point in time, he didn't have any of the other markers for autism. So you can have sensory processing disorder without being on the autism spectrum. So that's what I thought it was at first. Family doctor, pediatrician, they weren't concerned at all because of the milestones that he was hitting. And one thing though, I could not drive for the first year, almost year of Lucas's life, because Lucas literally spent all day, every day in the crook of my arm. He did not want me to put him down. And I would actually have to sleep sitting up with him in my arms. And I did that for the first maybe year and a half of his life. So we couldn't tell if it was something like reflux. We had taken him to the doctor to have that looked at. Was it reflux? Was it something that was disrupting him? But he just seemed to like that tight squeeze in the crook of the arm. So it was kind of interesting. A lot of it for him seemed to be sensory. and having or needing a lot of input. So he was diagnosed with a kidney condition 20 months of age. And then while on steroids for the kidney condition at 22 months of age is when we started to see skill loss. So he stopped making eye contact. He stopped responding to his name. He stopped pointing to things. And so I thought, this kind of looks like autism. And other people were noticing as well, because at that point, even though his vocabulary was well beyond what it's supposed to be for his age, which is one of the reasons the pediatrician had said, I don't think it's autism at this point. When he went on the steroid and we started seeing these other things, then it started to look like something that they call regressive autism. So regressive autism is something that shows up right around age 2.5. And it's where a child looks like they're developing normally and then all of a sudden will lose skills or regress. So that's kind of been our journey, where there are other influences too with skill loss for Lucas. So when his kidneys inflame, it seems as though the whole body, including the brain, inflames. So he will go back to the original baby books that he used to read when he was first diagnosed with a kidney condition. He's 6 now, and he was 20 months at that point in time. So there are just some interesting factors, but I did notice that even though he would lose skills while the kidney flare was happening and while he was on steroids, I would continue to speak to him, read to him the same way. I didn't change anything, because when he would stop the medication, sure, bud, just a minute, I'll come with you, okay? When he would stop the medication, everything that we had been doing, talking about, or what have you, would all just come out. So it's like he would have an instant developmental leap. So there's a factor too with illness, sickness, that influences his sensory needs. So I've been learning, things like, okay, maybe he's in pain, maybe he's hurting, and things like that. So that's kind of been our journey, where it's up and down, and it's also influenced by illness as well. So there's the autistic factor, and then also the illness factor that affects the sensory piece as well.
Wow. Thank you, Mikhail. So it's not just a neurological developmental challenge or issue, but it's also your overall biology, like how your rest of the body is impacting. And this is so interesting, and that's why it's called as a spectrum, because there is no one specific way a person would be autistic, right? And while it's so confusing about understanding autism, I think it's also demanding something greater. So if we take it, Chad, and this makes me feel and think like it can't be something new agey or something which is just starting to occur now, although the more we are talking about it, or the more scientists or doctors are researching about it, we are getting to know more about autism. But if I hear you, if I listen to all of, or go back to my own personal experience as well, I feel there have been so many people. In fact, sometimes I feel that within my own age group, when I was growing up around other children, such traits have been exhibited by a lot of people, which would be, judged very harshly, very punitively, a lot of times, because everybody was in that mode of having a specific understanding of how a person should behave, should be conducting themselves in a social condition. And whatever doesn't sort of comply to that should idea, it's a disorder, or it's a problem, or it's a challenge. Whereas now, when more and more we are starting to become aware of, like, okay, these are just some different conditions, it is still challenging for us at both an individual level, and we see it largely at a systemic level too. So Could you speak a little bit about those personal challenges or the systemic or organizational challenges that you come across, and how do you get to deal with these challenges in order to make a space for who your child is or in this world?
I'm going to break this into a few different parts, and I'm going to talk about family first. So family oftentimes is our closest ally and maybe our harshest critic. And in our family, we had a lot of help. We had my parents and my wife's parents. They would jump in and help, and they would see things, and they wouldn't know how to deal with some of the situations, and sometimes they would see the way I deal with a certain situation, and they might not agree, or they might have done things differently or whatever, but we just asked our families to just trust us. It was a situation where I think there was enough love and enough trust from a generational standpoint that they did sort of say, okay, you guys got this. How can we help? And that was very beneficial. It was incredible for our family to be, just from a generational standpoint, all of us sort of in alignment. I feel very blessed, very fortunate to have the family that I do and the help that I do. You did that.
Chad, you were stopped in between, so I think it's a connectivity or an internet issue. Because why don't you go in the meantime, Chad can check and come back on this question. Oh, sorry.
There we
Chad,
go.
are you back?
I'm here. Can you?
Just in between, the voice is sort of going up and down.
Okay. If you need to go to Mikhail, go for it.
I can hear you now. Why don't you give it a go? Yeah.
So I don't know how much of that you caught, but we had a lot of family that helped out. Sometimes they were critical, but they did trust us, and that was a huge blessing because a parents knows best kind of a thing, because we're experiencing it on a daily basis. And then the next piece is, I think, the public space, and we just had to learn very early on that there was going to be a lot of disruption in public, and we were just going to choose not to make eye contact with judgmental looks or acknowledge judgmental comments in public. And it was hard at first. There was a lot of, it's just tough as a parent to experience that in a public space. But we got used to it pretty fast, and we just got to the point where we just focused on each other.
Chad, the voice is again breaking. Oh my God. I've been so well enjoying his points of acknowledging that the family can be the ally or the critique, and that being a critique doesn't really help in accommodating to this change, and that you need to trust each other. And especially in those situations where we do not have the understanding or knowledge about anything, trust is the best factor that we can sort of go to. And so, Mikhail, I would have you speak about the challenge? I was looking at you and you were smiling when Chad was saying about the public spaces and that what sort of challenge it was, and that how it was a better strategy to just focus on each other and ignore or block out what others are, saying or behaving in a way. How do you deal with? Because in your case specifically, I'd say, what's your experience dealing with the challenges?
So I find that Chad made a lot of really good points where you pretty much just tune out the people who are giving judgmental looks. I think if you go with that sort of mindset or energy that I'm going to be judged, it will definitely happen. Whereas when we go out into the world, it's kind of like we're going out for us to be ourselves and to enjoy ourselves. And I found that having that, being in that frame of mind actually ends up sort of attracting really wonderful people to us. So Lucas is a busybody, and one of the things he enjoys doing is memorizing all the stores and the layouts of the malls. So what I've told myself is that if anyone does say anything or approach or anything happens, I will use it as an opportunity to inform and educate about autism. And it's wound up actually being a really good experience because the people at the mall now know Lucas, they know him by name. Some of them hug him, some of them give him little free things. And so I think a lot of people, there's that judgment factor that Chad had mentioned too, where sometimes people, and this comes up a lot, like, oh, your child doesn't look like they're autistic. So people sometimes think that autism has a look, right? So if they see your child doing something that they consider to be naughty or something that's, they're misbehaving, there's kind of thing where people judge because they feel that it should come with a certain consequence or punishment. And so I've used that as an opportunity to say, well, actually, this is what's happening. And it's not me justifying what I'm doing or feeling like I have to explain ourselves to anybody. It's more of, you can't just look at someone and presume to know what they're going through or that you have the solution and that your solution would work. So even I remember my dad saying to me that I have so much patience with Lucas. He said because when he was growing up, he used to do some of the things that Lucas does, and he would have been punished quite harshly for it. So I think it really got my dad's gears grinding and saying, hey, I think I'm somewhere on the spectrum too. And so I've even been able to see certain things within my family. My sister was very much like Lucas growing up. So I think within public spaces, you just know that you might go into a restaurant, sit down, order your food, and have to leave. Ask them to box it because maybe it's too loud, it's too noisy. So you have to almost live your life just on the fly. You have to get accustomed to going with the flow and just really coming from a place of real deep empathy, compassion, and understanding, because your child's not trying to be difficult. They're having a difficult time.
I think that's a very, very good point, that they are not trying to create difficulty for others, but that is what they are experiencing within them. And I think the one distinction that I've observed quite a lot in my son and myself as a child when I was growing up was like, I was socialized to an extent that I learned to hold back whatever was sort of rising up within me, and not show it out, or to manipulate, change, or alter my behavior for other people, to show it to other people. Whereas that doesn't happen with my son. He is who he is, and he's very authentic to the level that if anger is rising in him, he needs to show it. He just can't hold it back inside him. So there isn't that manipulative wall, which in a way I think is pretty good, because it's so simple. But I can understand when the entire world around us has learned to behave in a very inauthentic, socialized way, always thinking about, oh, what should be the right behavior and how should they be perceived and taken, then you would just hold it deep inside you. Whereas in these children or in adults, I think their awareness of or their, so there are no walls like that. And because the world is made differently, it does pose a lot of challenges. It's not like they are creating the problem, but some problem is present which they cannot just hold it back inside themselves. And I think to understand that, what it really requires is a huge mind shift or a different reframe to look at people's behavior or actions. So let's have a little discussion around when somebody is growing up with such different capabilities and capacities, whereas our school systems and our work environments are primarily built and created around what looks like a very neurotypical sort of behavior, a very socialized, regimented sort of behavior. How do we create space for their future or who they are growing to be, and to make it really safe for them, where they are not constantly judged? Because a lot of adults who are on autistic spectrum or who got to understand or know about themselves at a much later age and stage in life, and even haven't had the chances to develop the kind of strategies they might require to manage themselves, would find it really, really challenging.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
So in our case, we leaned into things that he excelled at. So he was fascinated with wheels, anything that spun, and he began to learn how to drive his older sister's electric scooter, or at an early age learned how to drive a zero-turn lawnmower. And we realized at an early age that mechanically speaking, he's so fascinated with things spinning and stuff moving that he just really learned very quickly how to operate machinery. And I know that sounds dangerous, but he can, like at 10 years old, he could run an excavator. We have a construction company. And so and we also snow ski as a family because he's so fascinated with the chairlift and the way the chairlift works and the noises that it makes and all that stuff. And so that's one of his fascinations. And so we began to just explore different options as a child in things that he enjoyed to do, and then leaned into bigger versions of those things as he grew up. And now he's 15. He's going to be part of the workforce, hopefully someday soon. One of the things that he wants to do is operate a ski lift in the wintertime. And he wants to operate machinery in the summertime. And so trying to figure out ways to lean into that and encourage that and help him process. But for us, it was just really paying attention to what he was interested in as a child and figuring out ways to nudge him toward bigger versions of that moving into his adolescence.
Awesome. Focusing on the strengths and the gifts that they are born with.
Yeah.
Amazing. Mikhail, what about you?
I agree 100%. I have the same mindset about this. And, I think if we look at children a little bit more closely, we have to be really careful that we're not so focused on training them to act and behave in certain ways that we inadvertently end up interfering with some of their natural gifting. So the same way that Chad was mentioning his son loved wheels, and then it kind of translated into real world abilities and skills, I do the same thing with Lucas. So I noticed at a very early age, Lucas was really interested in letters, and he wound up teaching himself to read age 2. And I was kind of anti-screens for a while, but I discovered that the Leap Pad, the learning device, he was able to actually keep up with the Leap Pad. So when I gave him the Leap Pad, there was one night he was up due to steroids. It was 3 o'clock in the morning, and he discovered how to spell the word cat and then dog and then bat. The next night, because I guess in his brain he had put together the sounds with the letters, the next night he typed out Psalm 91 and a motivational speech that he memorized from YouTube. So we have to really be sure that we're observing what it is our child is doing, not be so quick to remove the behavior, because it might actually be a bridge that leads to something, that leads to their gift, that leads to their talent. So I noticed Lucas really used to like pouring things and dumping things. So I would make sensory bins at home, but then I thought, okay, why don't I translate this into a real life skill? So by age 2, he was cracking eggs. So whenever I would cook or bake, I would have him pour and dump all of those things. And so he loves cooking now. He loves being in the kitchen, and he has a play kitchen. So he loves pretend play. So I think for me, the biggest thing I've learned from this is to observe the child closely, because sometimes some things that we think are nonsense are actually part and parcel of their gifts and talents and actual capabilities. So I've even learned about gifts and talents I didn't realize I had once I started observing Lucas. So I've reconnected with parts of myself that were dormant for so long.
Amazing. And this is so beautiful because both of you have sort of are modeling all those capacities and capabilities which are actually required from us coaches and mentors. This the ability to stay in observation of the person in front of you without making any judgments, right? The ability to notice the potential which is showing up in them in this space is exactly what is required from the coaches, which you naturally, being the parents, have sort of exhibited, and you do it almost every day. So in that view, you are accomplished coaches. I mean, you can coach anybody now because you have that unconditional positive regard and that whole lot of compassion in your heart and love to observe and help. And that is what I would like to show to all the coaches who are here on the call today, is that it's not just in the training and knowing what competencies are required, but really putting yourself in those life situations where all of those competencies or skills are asked from you. And like Chad, you and Mikkel, you have shown and observed it with your respective sons, that, and I do it with my son as well, that when I'm in a place of observation, there is so much that opens up to us in front of us. So taking it to, there was, so when we were planning to do this chat, some of the key questions that were coming to us were more from the organizational perspectives, like what do organizations do to make safe spaces for neurodiversity, and what do people need to do? I think they might be getting the answer that this is what it is. You have to stay in observation instead of being in the judgment, which I think is demanding at an organizational level to look at all the systems of how the talent is acquired, or how do talent get defined in the first place, right? And how is it then measured and assessed, and what is the overall objective of the organizations? Is it only to draw profits, or really to invest in people and make a space that, you know, that they all have their own specific talents? So, Chad, you are also a professional. You have your own work, you have your own industry. Would you say that in some ways having an understanding of autism or having an autistic child has shifted or altered your perspective at workspace in some way?
Oh, for sure. So we have a few different businesses in a few different industries. And so one of the main ones is I'm a contractor. And so we're dealing with, labor all the time, different people coming through to, that have specific trade skills and that sort of thing. And so my eyes have been opened wide to different personalities and being a little more understanding of different idiosyncrasies and different scenarios or whatever. And for sure, it's helped me out, and it's given me a lot more grace, a lot more understanding, and just patience for the real world. Because now, like, hey, not everybody's wired like I am, and being able to learn how to stop, learn from whoever it is that you're speaking with or interacting with, and trying to, in my mind, it is the most important thing is to figure out a way to get to their level, whether it's, physically, like if it's a small child and something's happening, get down on their level, look them, be eye level with them, or intellectually, if you've got to really focus because the person you're speaking to sounds much smarter than you, like hone in your focus. I've had to do that where I'm like, okay, no distractions. This person is different than I am. They're wired different than I am. And I feel like they're way smarter than me. So I need to, stop whatever I'm doing and really focus. And so just being able to adapt and get your place to, or get your own being to a place where you can understand better and communicate better and show that person that you're willing to do those things. I remember early on in our lives with autism, Max had a birthday party, and two other autistic boys were at the birthday party. Well, it was time for them to leave, and one of them laid down in our gravel driveway and would not get up. Mom couldn't touch him. And I see this through the window, and I walk outside, and I sort of made a wide walk around so the boy could see me. And I approached him very slowly, where, face to face. And I just laid down on the gravel with him, and I just started talking to him. Didn't even say, hey, it's time to go. Your mom's trying to get you in the car. I just started asking him questions. And we were both laying on the gravel, getting dirty. And within a couple of minutes, the walls came down. And after a short conversation, I did say, hey, I think your mom is trying to get you in the car so you guys can go home. And he's like, okay. And he got up and got in the car. And so it's just a matter, and that was a blessing that I got early on, realizing that you've got to do whatever you can to get to that person's level so that you can communicate with them well.
Wow, that's so beautiful. Instead of trying to get people to your level and say that, oh, they come and talk, I will understand in this language, you say, okay, what can I do to understand the language that they understand? It's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that example, Chad. Mikhail, what would you say your perspective is now about the work? And because I know you deal quite a lot with the school system as well and all, and you're also an advocate now for, autism. So what would you say his experience has changed and shifted in you?
I think for me, deeper levels of compassion and empathy and non-judgment. So what Chad was saying, where when you're dealing with people day to day, like it's no longer a script that comes in that tells you something about this other person. It's more so, let me observe and see what is really happening here, while also learning to have more compassion for myself too, which allows me to show up in a better way to deal with whether it's Lucas or people out in the world. So the school system, for example, the challenges we faced are that his teachers are lovely, they're wonderful human beings, and I've had to just accept that they are where they are in terms of what they know, in terms of what they know or understand about my child. And so me getting frustrated, angry, or flustered isn't fair to them or me or Lucas. So I've had to learn to find ways to communicate. And I say that I've had to learn to speak other people's language, including Lucas's. So I say that I speak Lucanese, right? So when he can't speak English, I've had to learn to speak his language. And so we have nonverbal communication that happens in our home too. We have lots of coincidences that occur in this house. I'll be thinking something and he comes and starts talking about it. And so I've been experiencing more and more of these synchronicities the more open I've been to embracing and accepting people where they are. So his teachers are doing their best every day, but I do recognize that within the school system, we do need to change the way that we look at human beings. So we need to see people in their uniqueness and in their authenticity and really keep questioning, what does this child need? What does this child need? Whereas right now it's, how can I get this child to change and be like everyone else? But the illusion is that no human being is like any other human being. And so I think what a lot of dealing with this has taught me is how to step into my own authenticity too, which is what helps me to get that message across. Because when you're more authentic, it's coming from a place of honesty and from truth, and people like that and people gravitate towards that. So his teachers, they trust me. There's this level of trust because I trust myself now that I've shed all the things that I was taught. I've shed those things. I've been able to advocate better. I've been able to share more. We've got a long way to go though in the school system, because we're trying to break generations of specific mindsets around how people should act, behave, and show up. Or I noticed one of the challenges we face, like with Lucas, is that as soon as he has a breakthrough or hit like a goal, they almost nail him. Like, okay, now that you can say these words, let's now start scolding you and getting you to be like everyone else. And it's kind of like, no, let's take a moment to celebrate this so that he'll be interested in continuing to step forward. Because if he associates progress with punishment, he's not going to want to make progress. He's going to want to remain the same.
Amazing. And while we are talking about this, I also understand and realize that when majority of us have grown up in a system where we've been taught to adapt in a certain way, and then when we need to come to that space of a continuous observation and changing ourselves or going to spaces where we alter, we take those initiative, this can also be very tiring and exhausting for self. So while we are making space and caring for a safe space for neurodiverse situations or different behaviors or different characteristics in our lives, how do you keep yourself I would say, energized and sane and grounded and stable? Like, what does it take for you to be in that space to be able to be a strong support for all that change that need to happen around you?
I'll start. We in our family, we focus a ton of energy on holistic wellness. So we exercise a ton. We actually, I call it microdosing adversity, where we spend time working on cold water therapy and saunas and that sort of thing as a mental health exercise. You know, as a dad, I felt a lot of time in the early years as a failure. Like I didn't know what to do. I couldn't help my son. Things were coming off the rails, and it affected my own spirituality and my own mental health. And you know, it's real easy for a parent. The depression rate for parents of children with special needs is off the chart. And so I began to really, this was over a decade ago, began to focus, to just deep dive on my own wellness. And so, and it's become part of our family dynamic now, including our son, Max. He works out every day, partly because his IEP says he can do PE at home, but we focus on everything, not just physical exercise, but mental health stuff, and our own spirituality. And our Christian faith is, you know, at the forefront of how we navigate life. And so but it's a holistic wellness thing. We don't focus just on one or the other. We recognize that if you don't work on all three at the same time, they all begin to suffer. And so for us, it's you know, and it goes down the rabbit hole of clean eating and you know, detoxifying our house and that sort of thing, and allowing us to maintain our health in a way that we can be the best parents that we can be for our kids, because our kids deserve our best. And so we need to be in the best shape mentally, physically, and spiritually that we can be.
Amazing. I love the way you say we instead of I, and how you recognize the significance of family and then community. And it's true for human needs, you know, an individual effort isn't anything. You know, you do need to build up a community. You do need to have that support system, whether it is within the family or in a friend circle or in the schools or outside elsewhere. And absolutely love what you've said about the holistic health, like recognizing that you need to be strong at all the levels of body, mind, and spirit. Thank you so much, Chad. Mikkel, what's your go-to?
I could just say ditto. But no, Chad's absolutely right. Like, so I cannot function if I don't eat properly, if I don't pray and meditate, if I don't get enough rest. And I cannot stress this enough. I think a lot of parents think that they're being selfish if they take care of themselves, if they actually practice proper self-care. But I think what we need to remember is there's a nonverbal component that happens in terms of children and what they see. And so we need to remember that children will be what they see, not just what we tell them. So if we're running ourselves ragged and not taking care of ourselves, they're going to grow up and that programming is going to be there somewhere until they become aware of it and maybe change it. And so same thing, like Lucas has a kidney condition, so eating clean is a must. He's on a low sodium diet. We can't have a lot of gluten or dairy or sugar. So we do have a naturopath, and some of those treatments help to manage the kidney condition as well. And so exercise, I mentioned to you guys, Lucas never napped as a newborn, infant, or toddler. And it was through prayer that I really got the endurance and still get the endurance that I need to run my race every day. I say that this has been literally like Navy SEAL training, because every day there's something new that pops up and you have to be able to pivot. You have to be able to take a step back, breathe. I go into my prayer closet, take a moment. If I need to cry, I let my emotions out. I self-coach in that closet if I need to. And the interesting thing is, if I go into that closet, Lucas comes too. Lucas loves church, so that's part of our routine. We go every Sunday. And when he was little, I recognized I need to get back into shape because he is so busy. So at one point, I actually was going to bed when he did, but then getting up at midnight and doing my workouts at that point for 1 hour and then going back to bed. That was the time that I had, because during the day, that was during the phase of his life where he needed to be held all the time. So I couldn't put him down without him having an absolute utter meltdown. So I think once you make a decision that this is what I have to do for my wellness, this is what we need to do, I discovered I don't actually need 8 hours of sleep. I've discovered a lot of things about myself once I recognize what it is I need. And so even on this journey, I've discovered that a lot of parents can't answer that question. If you ask them, what do you need? So once I was able to recognize, I can do this kind of easily for Lucas, I need to be able to do that, answer that question for me too. And that's what's kept us on a path to wellness. So the same way that a baby goes from milk to pureed foods to solid foods to then other foods, we need to remember we're aging too, that we're going through different things in our lives, and we need to do check-ins with ourselves, our mind, our body, and everything, and say, what do I need to nourish myself in each of these areas? Because what was working last year may not be working now for what we're going through now. So I think that's probably what keeps me generally well and keeps Lucas generally well too.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Mikhail and Chad. There's been a lot in what you've shared about your own life journeys and your own observations and your own routines for us as coaches to figure out, like, what are the key mindsets which are required for us to hold that safe space for everybody, for the neurodiversity and for different conditions, and also to keep ourselves safe in the process. So although we haven't had any direct answer to a lot of questions about how do people manage themselves, but I'm sure there's a lot of reflection points that would have shown up for people. And we've constantly seen a lot of love and appreciation flowing on this side from people. Any final words before we close today's conversation?
I wanted to make mention of one thing, and that is from an organizational standpoint. And, I know that was kind of the intended focus of today's conversation. I did want to mention one thing. The IEP process at your child's school is a big deal. And for those first couple meetings when your child's really young, they're quite scary as a parent. Because you've got a room full of educators basically telling you all of the deficiencies in your child, and it's very hard to do and hard to deal with. And as the years went on for us, we made it a special point to, when we came in that room and sat down in front of all those educators, we looked at them and said, hey, we think that we view you guys as our teammates in this. We are doing everything we can at home to nurture and raise and develop our child. We don't have the tools that you guys have. And so when we leave our child in your care for a few hours during the school day, We just see this as a team effort. You guys are using the tools that you have to help and raise and nurture our child. And then we take the rest when our child's at home. And that did incredible things for us in our school system, opening that door, because I'm sure that those educators want to tell you as a parent the deficiencies. It's kind of their job. And so it's got to be just as hard for them as it is for us as the parent to hear those things. And so we began to say that to the team, and it opened up so many different doors, and to the point where now Max is in high school. He gets to leave or enter and leave the building on a side door that's always locked, that there's a code that somebody inside the building can see him either through a window or on a camera, and they can manually unlock it for him. But that's the kind of thing that happens when you go into an organizational real world environment as a team approach. The doors begin to open and the accommodations start to be made, and the communication lines stay open between parent and teacher and all those things. And so our IEP is wild. It evolves. Like, part of his schooling happens at home, part of his schooling happens at the public school system, and where he comes and goes and the time of day, because of his sensory stuff and his trying to avoid a crowd, he doesn't ever be in the cafeteria or in the assembly. But those are accommodations that they've made for him, because we just tried to make the lines of communication as open as possible and tried to approach the IEP from a teamwork standpoint.
Wonderful. Taking the initiative, keeping the communication lines open, engaging and including and inviting everybody else to be the part of the journey. That's amazing. Thank you so much, Chad.
You bet.
All right, I would say thank you everybody for joining us. Mikhail, did you want to share something before we close today's conversation?
I was just going to say, as challenging as this is, make sure you're taking the time every day to celebrate what seems like the little things, because before you know it, something that's seemingly small ends up being something that looks like a really big miracle, and so one thing this has taught me is really to take my hands off the wheel, to surrender quite a bit, to trust more, that everything will work out. I think the time factor for me was a big one, and just enjoying every age and stage, enjoying just daily life and looking out for things to celebrate, to be happy about. And I think that exactly what Chad said with the school system, I do actually, and I did say that to Lucas's support staff, that I consider everyone to be part of his team, part of our team, and what can we do to help him thrive, and what can I do to support them in any way. So we have pretty open lines of communication. And Chad was right. We did have a conversation. The school psychologist was saying they don't test for gifting until a child is 8, because their belief is that most children lose their gifting by age 8. So I, of course, disagree with that, but that's the way that the school system functions for now. So what we're doing is just seeking testing outside of the school system with his other supports outside of school. And so, someone may shut a door, but somebody out there has a key that will open that door. So just be mindful that just because a door closes, it doesn't mean it's going to remain shut, or just because you don't get the outcome you were expecting today, there is a path, there is a process, and you will get there. Just keep yourself healthy and well, keep your channels clear, and you will get all of the information and everything you require and desire.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, both of you. And thank you everybody for joining in and sharing all the love and appreciation. And if you want to connect, you have Chad's YouTube and Mikhail is there on Instagram as well. Please stay connected, keep sharing your questions and queries, and do reflect back on whatever we've discussed today. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful day. Thank you, Chad, once again. Thank you, Mikhail.